to hit record.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Iron Culture. It is me, Eric Trexler, joined by the Dr. Eric Helms. Do not pay any attention to what you see on the screen as I scramble to get our recording started, just to make sure we have that beautiful, beautiful backup recording for fidelity's sake. But we are here. It's Monday night at 7 p.m. Some folks, Helms, I don't want to show people behind the curtain too much and spoil the surprise, but some people are filing in from Front Page Fitness that I record with Lauren Colenso Semple, filing straight into Iron Culture that we record just a brief 15-minute period later. So, folks, if nothing else, hit like, hit subscribe. Do me a favor. I'm out here working hard for the people. This is a back-to-back live stream extravaganza every Monday, but we are here and we are thrilled because we got Helms, and he is on the precipice of 3DMJ history, bodybuilding history, and just a really, really big show. So, Helms, how are you doing, and what does the next week have in store for you?
Oh, I'm doing really well, man. I am 5 days out from getting on stage at the same time in the same division for the first time since 2007 with my brother from another mother, Alberto Nunez, as we compete in the pro division, where I've only competed as an amateur at the Sacramento Muscle Mayhem, WNBF's biggest show in California, that we have been doing for years. We got to do it back in 2019, which was the 10-year anniversary of 3DMJ. That's the last time I did it. I was gunning for my pro card at that time. Took second, as I have many times in my pursuit of the pro card. And I got to watch, Jeff Alberts battle it out in that show. We both got to do it together. But this time, Jeff is not getting on stage this year, but both myself, Brad, and Alberto Nunez are. And this time, it's a very different landscape. The first time I did the Muscle Mayhem, what back then it was called the Cap City, was '09. And that is when I got into the overall with Jeff, and he lost by 1 point. And I lost by many more points to probably the other three guys, maybe at least two of the other guys in the overall. To Moji Olua, and then he went on to get his pro card at the Washington state show just a few weeks later. And Berto's competed as a pro there multiple times. It's always one of the most competitive pro shows, and that has only increased because now it is the last chance in the States, and might even be the last chance anywhere in the WNBF to qualify for Worlds, because you have to do a pro show before doing pro Worlds. Unless it's your season you turn pro. So there's going to be some really impressive people coming out. Sam Okinola he's saying it's going to be his last show. So this is his swan song. For those who don't know, this is incredibly impressive. Sam Okinola, former WNBF Pro World Champion, incredible physique, great guy, has been running marathons. And he ran a marathon this last weekend, and now he is competing in a bodybuilding show a week later. It's one of the most impressive things. I'm going to say this with all respect for Sam. He is not at his peak that he was when he was a WNBF World Champion, but he is surprisingly close to that, despite the fact that he is balancing bodybuilding with running marathons. It's something that I can't even fathom, even as someone traveling around the world, speaking relatively low calories. People look at my preps and like, how do you do it? And I'm like, at least I didn't have to run a marathon last weekend. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So me, Berto, Sam, and I have never competed with Sam. I never had the privilege of being in even the same category, let alone caliber as him. So to have the opportunity to get on stage with Sam is huge. Berto, of course, like you said, it's history. It's huge. But there's also some really good other impressive competitors coming in. Sergio Whiteman, Serge. He placed third at WNBF Worlds last year. He is one of the best bodybuilders in Spain. Absolute ball of muscle, really impressive physique. So he's coming over before he does Worlds. So he's a podium finisher at Worlds. Eddie Saldana, who is an incredible athlete, one of Cliff Wilson's clients. So he's going to peak well. He's going to come in full. He looks fantastic. He looks great. He's going to be coming in. And I know there's others in the woodworks I'm not aware of. There's a few people making their pro debut there. So we're probably going to have a class of maybe 8 to 10 athletes, and it's a lot of people looking to go to Worlds. So it's going to be some of the best of the best. So basically, I went up against the best in Asia at the Taiwan Championships, and now I'm going up against like the best in the US and even some Europeans who are coming over. So I am really throwing myself to the wolves, and it's only going to get harder from that because this is only 2 weeks before Worlds. Another fun thing is this time I am doing the amateur classic physique because I don't plan on having any types of extra challenges that I throw at myself, like going to a foreign country's emergency room or having my soul exit my body due to inadvisable laxative use. I'm just going to have a good peak. So, yeah, one little last piece of insight into kind of how things have gone, and then I think we can get on to giving a shout out to our friends at Elite FTS
Yeah.
and taking some of these questions from the audience
Sure. Yeah.
who haven't had an opportunity. But yeah, I've been getting some questions about what have I done and how have my prep been going. I posted my 6 days out video, and people are like, hey, what's your height? What's your weight? What'd you do? How are things going? You look leaner than you did at Taiwan, but you also look full. So post Taiwan, I did 2 weeks of digging, and the wheels started to fall off. You know, um, when you're that lean and you're pushing, I basically started to experience a lot of lethargy, water retention, um, very hard just experience, and also uh, I don't need to make iron culture about my bowel movement frequency. Let's just say I hit a new PR there as well, and the siege was impressively long even for me, and we hit a point where we were like, okay, like this probably is getting you a touch leaner, but we're not going to be able to see it, nor will we have a predictable peak unless we have at least a couple weeks of like recovery and restoration, and it's time to start eating up. So we had 2 weeks of dieting, and now I'm on my third week of eating up. It is actually peak week. So with big refeeds. So I had a pretty big refeed, and then right after those 2 weeks of dieting, like 2,600 calories into a step up. We're actually started tracking macros and being very precise because we're kind of doing a taper stepwise up in calories. So I've actually been not doing the auto-regulated dieting thing for the last 2 weeks. I've been staying to 40 to 45 grams of fat. The first week of eating up, 200 to 225 carbs, and same thing with protein. And then had a big refeed that weekend, close to 3,000 calories 2 days in a row. And then we jumped up to 250 to 270 grams of carbs, which I'm still maintaining. And I had a refeed of closer to 2,700 for 2 days. It's kind of like a mock peak week, and seeing at what point do I look my best relative to those refeed days. And I am allowed to increase or decrease my carb intake, but the idea is to get me really good at utilizing carbs, filling out, not retaining water, getting regular digestion, and feeling much better. And Trex, I almost hesitate to share this because it's crazy. My body, everything is restabilized. It took the full 2 weeks. My body weight is chilling at 82 and a half. And when I was at this point prior to Worlds, same conditioning, I was 79 and a half in 2023. That's 3 kilos more that I'm hanging around at the same point in the season where I turned pro. I know some of it is the really successful approach we took to prep, but I think the majority of it is what I did in the off season, and that is mind blowing to me. But I'm really ecstatic. Things couldn't be going better, and I'm glad we made the decision to start eating up when we did instead of probably burning the candle too much on one end versus the other.
Well, if you had me in your corner, we'd still be pushing to this day. We'd be
Let's go.
grinding and grinding and grinding, and then we'd look back and say that was a big mistake. But we did try hard.
Yes.
We did maximally try hard. But no, that's awesome, man. And you were telling me off camera, you were saying that Jeff chickened out and he was too scared to step on stage. So
Let the record show that Jeff unfortunately had a death in the family.
oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if and I hope that's something he has shared publicly. As I've just said it, I'm not sure he has, but let's just say that Jeff's been dealing with a lot, and I think he made the exact right decision to not compete this year and be fully available for his family. No one at Jeff that I said that, but do give him love and support. But he is there in a coaching capacity and a support capacity. Brad Loomis, however, is competing. And Brad took a long stint of powerlifting away from his bodybuilding journey, so his WNBF Pro card lapsed. And he is gunning for, I think he's going to be competing in the Masters and the Open. And he actually won the Masters at the Mayhem last, I think 2 years ago when he competed last, 2023. There wasn't enough to award a Masters Pro card, but one thing Berto and I are banking on is if Brad's able to get his Masters Pro card, we've both committed and asked permission to do a late crossover into the Masters Pro division so that Brad, myself, and Berto can be on stage. And that will also have been the first time in ages. Brad and I haven't competed in the same show since 2009 or
Yeah.
something like that.
Now, you said the
So
last time you were on stage with Berto was '07. Is that right?
we did the same first show together, the INBA 2007 Muscle and Black,
And so,
Silver and Black Muscle Classic.
how does it make you feel that there are people who were born in that year who are now adults who are going to vote for the first time tomorrow?
It makes me feel amazing because 18 years, we have a whole adult human since we have competed together last. Him and I were literally just talking about that in the DMs, and we're stoked, man. And it's amazing how much we did not know what the hell we were doing in 2007. He competed quite literally 30 pounds over stage weight, and I competed yellow, flexing my abs down, looking like an oil slick, so you couldn't even see that I got into decent condition for a first-time competitor.
Yeah.
And also was drinking Gatorade all day and spilled over. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, bodybuilding can get tough. There's some technicalities you wanna be mindful of there. All right, Helms. I think today is a lovely day to dive into some Q&A stuff. I tried to bait you into a lighthearted barb within your 3DMJ crew. That was a huge mistake. So I'm going to stick to the script and just talk science from now until the end of time. I've learned my lesson. I will not try any lighthearted barbs or to instigate any on-air fights between you and your dearest friends. Okay, so starting out here, we had a question here.
Oh, hold on.
Yes.
Elite FTS, folks.
Oh.
MRR10. Head over. 10% discount. That's Mass Research Review 10 if you need help remembering it. They're amazing. All your lifting needs. And of course, if you want to support the show, like, subscribe, 5 stars. Subscribe to the massresearchreview.com where we just had an issue recently dropped just a few days ago. Really cool stuff. And by the way, if you're interested in the topic of auto-regulated dieting and how, except for the last couple weeks, I have not been tracking macros precisely and how I did that and got into condition and had a really good pro debut, that article's free now. It's the cover story for the issue, so members got it. But also, if anyone wants to read it, you can read it for free at massresearchreview.com.
But of course, we keep the really good stuff behind a paywall, and that's where you can find my articles from the past month. You got to fork it over if you want to see those. But no, this past issue had an article about being too evidence-based to follow the evidence, Helms.
That was really good article, by the way.
Me being fed up about how evidence-based fitness works as a loosely defined category of thought.
Or it doesn't work.
Talked about exercise snacks for making gains. We actually had a question about that in the Q&A portal. And by the way, folks, if you want to submit questions, it's massresearchreview.com/ironculture. You can go there and submit questions for the show anytime you like. I wrote a mass article about a cool little intervention, a very light touch intervention of just getting the hell away from your phone for half an hour before bed and getting 20-30 minutes of bright light in the morning and seeing how that could impact a variety of outcomes. And the results were honestly pretty interesting for how subtle that intervention is. A very low cost, very low burden intervention, which could really pan out and make a difference. Of course, Lauren with a great article about whether or not it's safe to lift during pregnancy. I wrote an article. This was one that I don't know why I got inspired to write this other than, a new study popped up and I was like, I need to dig into that deeper. But Helms, the statistics on the number of people who experience tummy aches is kind of insane. So
Yeah.
I wrote an article that was basically, it started about a study that was one of multiple now that has shown that a lot of people who believe they're sensitive to gluten in randomized blinded settings, they actually don't have an uptick in their symptoms when gluten is either introduced or removed from their diet. But instead of just saying, you guys are all, placebo or noceboing yourselves and this is all fake and made up, my question was, hey, there's a lot of people who have GI issues, and let's try to figure out how you would actually navigate that in a meaningful way if it's not as simple as just less gluten. So it's a really interesting look at all the most common things that cause GI upset or GI symptoms in people who may not even meet the criteria for having a diagnosed stomach issue. But if you're someone who, quote unquote, has a sensitive stomach, or you find that, often you're having symptoms, what's crazy to me is the fact that I knew you weren't alone, but the statistics are insane. So
Hmm.
there's a survey with 72,000 people that found 61% of adults who took the survey reported at least one GI symptom in the past week. And again, 72,000 people, very representative, massive sample. So 61% of people were like, oh, yeah, within the past week, I've had a GI issue. And a different survey with 73,000 people found that over 40% of adults met the diagnostic criteria for at least one functional GI disorder. So
Wow.
40% meeting diagnostic criteria for a disorder. So all that is to say, if my words are hitting your ears as you're listening to this on a podcast platform or watching on YouTube, there's a darn good chance that you've had some GI issues recently or recurring. And so I talk all about how you might address that and what kind of levers you can pull, even if you don't have that elusive diagnosis that many people seek.
And what I liked about it is I think a lot of people in the evidence-based community, they get so used to kind of going on the attack against things that are woo,
Yeah.
or kind of like the infallibility of the subjective experience because they're all leaned in on kind of the objective approach to quantitative research, and they end up whether they intend or not like gaslighting people
Yeah.
related to their symptoms. And one thing, like I thought immediately when people started experiencing subjective improvements in GI distress when they went carnivore, was not this is placebo or nocebo or what have you, was, elimination diets do work.
Yep.
And one thing that people don't realize is that diets that are high in gluten typically co-vary with a lot of other things, like FODMAPs.
Yep.
And while it may not be the gluten itself, when you cut out gluten, you might be cutting out something that bothers you. Like a lot of people don't realize, like oats actually don't have gluten in them, but they are often at facilities that are cooked or also process other things like soy, nuts, other things. And people do have issues just with oats or just having a large amount of soluble fiber. Sometimes this blocks them and backs them up a little bit. So, yeah, there's a tremendous amount of things it could be that when you reduce the amount of gluten in your diet, you're co-varying with removing other things. Just like when people go carnivore, and let's say you're just consuming maybe too high of a fiber, or maybe some one vegetable or one fruit that you might have an issue with. So, for example, you mentioned apples.
Yep.
Apples are relatively high in certain sugar alcohols that for some people they have issues with. Um, it's
It's so
it's
weird
not the
though.
carnivore diet. It's cutting out the apples,
Yeah,
right?
it's so weird though because if I have apples with peanut butter, I'm good. It's like adding the peanut butter slows that digestion enough or just adds enough to that whole milieu working through my GI tract. Apples with peanut butter, I'm fine. But if I have an apple or like a large serving of like sliced up apples with nothing with it, then yeah, hurts my stomach. Makes me feel bad. So I guess I'll go carnivore per your advice.
That
Good
is the
idea.
only that's exactly what I said. But I think, yeah, just to your point, like there probably are reasons for why people experience what they experience. Are they sometimes psychological? Absolutely. But do I think they're most of the time that? Probably not. I think they're modified by stress, but I think telling people, "Oh yeah, your gluten sensitivity is BS. It's all in your head," is at best going to be just disrespectful,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And to be honest, what happened to the fine art of using the placebo effect to one's advantage? I mean, far be it from me to be a traveling snake oil salesman, rolling from town to town with my tinctures and potions and placeboing people into the life of their dreams. But Helms, if someone told me, they're having these GI issues, even if I did suspect that it was psychological, who's to stop me from saying, okay, well, let's, not that I'm a medical practitioner who would do this, but in a hypothetical, why not say, okay, well, we want to do, some form of elimination diet, some reintroduction, want to go with the lightest touch as possible and also include stress reduction as a part of this, make it a holistic approach. And so maybe we do this whole thing. The fact that we're doing an elimination and reintroduction cycle, or kind of series of cycles, is going to give them the peace of mind to say, hey, we're doing things. We're actually
Hmm.
taking steps in the right direction. Maybe it is the stress reduction intervention that's actually causing the symptoms to subside, but who cares? If we get to the point where we're able to get past that, we reintroduce some foods. At the end of the day, we say, wow, it looks like all the foods that we reintroduced, they seem to be more acceptable now. They're sitting well with you. But the one thing that we really kept was that whole stress reduction thing is the kind of thing we kept all along. If leveraging that placebo effect of let's move some things around while we actually do the targeted intervention, if nothing else, just to get you more open to the idea of resolving those symptoms, that's what it's for, man. The placebo effects are effects. And if we can get you to a point where we say, hey, now we've reintroduced all the foods we took out, you're feeling great. The only thing that we changed was you kept doing that stress reduction technique we talked about the whole time. We're golden. Keep doing it, right? So I feel like in the fitness world, we have become, especially with the pain science research, we've become so sensitive to the nocebo effect and how to not touch it like a hot stove. And people are so hesitant to acknowledge that the placebo effect exists, that it's real, and that it can be leveraged in an ethical way. Does that make sense?
I No, I totally agree, and I think the only
Isn't
I'm not even going to
I
say
don't want to say,
pushback, but caveat.
well, I don't, let me do a quick caveat before
Sure.
your caveat. More appropriately, what I'm doing there is not leveraging the placebo effect, but expectancy effects. And I think
Yes.
that is where being a practitioner, if you have a client who is absolutely dead set on solution A, and you think you have a damn good reason to believe solution B is the real solution, what in the world is to stop you from doing both? If they're not mutually exclusive, allow that expectancy effect to come along with the ride and have a path for how we then shift beyond that. And maybe there is an eventual point where we realize, oh, it seems like solution A was just kind of along for the ride, and that's fine. What do we care? But I think it's interesting that we have become, we, the collective evidence based fitness people, so sensitive to nocebo effects or negative expectancy, but completely walled off to leveraging positive expectancy in an ethical way that is not dishonest in any way and ultimately just puts someone on a clear path toward resolving whatever the issue is. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, and I think the caveat on top of that caveat, which I'm glad you explained, is not even a pushback now, but it's something to be aware of. Is I do think it's relatively common where people are actually having a negative expectancy. They have a prior history of injury, so they have kinesiophobia related to a given movement, and it may not be the movement that is really the issue. And we want to expand their capacity to move. Ideally, you know,
Yeah.
if it's not like you have to do a freaking barbell squat to do activities of daily living, but there are times when that can be counterproductive, especially for someone who otherwise would like to do that movement, or it's part of their sport that they feel they have to abandon, and that they're under a psychological illusion of that. Likewise, the disordered eating is arguably even more of an issue or common. Like if their solution is, oh, like I notice when I pull out this food and this food and this food and this food Trex, how often do we see that?
Yeah.
That I'm fine, and it becomes sometimes a self-fulfilling prophecy because they don't introduce it in any kind of measured way, or it's at the end of a diet and it becomes a binge, or it's a dose issue rather than a food issue, or they're afraid of it and that stress comes up. I think you just have to be provide your due diligence to make sure that you're not necessarily encouraging a disordered eating pattern.
Yes.
or kinesiophobia, which often covaries. But I think also that you can't just push back on people and say, no, this is kinesiophobia, or no, this is all in your head. I think you kind of have to construct a, it could be that you do actually have an issue with oats. So let's cut them out. But I think we also need to be open that it couldn't be oats, that it might be
Right.
something else. Is that something you're open to? And then they have to actually wrestle with that a little bit. And if they build the resilience to the point where they're even willing to reintroduce it and face their fears, then I think that's a positive step in the right direction. That's about the best you can do. So
Yeah.
that's the only thing I would add. It's just how often people
Yeah.
have those issues.
I think an important thing went unsaid as I was rolling there, speaking in very general terms, which is obviously if, like I said, you think it's solution B as the coach, they think it's solution A. The underlying assumption is that solution A is not actually leading into harmful things, right?
Right.
And so I'm thinking more, on the nose in this concept of a client says, I can't eat gluten. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not getting any alarm, red flags that this is part of some big, you know, cluster of disorder
Orthorexia.
eating kind of, disordered symptoms wrapped up together. If it really is just, I don't think I can eat gluten. What do I care if you eat gluten? So I do think, we have multiple levers we can pull when we're trying to ultimately get you to the point where you don't have chronic GI issues, because that's not good for you. It's not good for your fitness. You don't enjoy that. So let's solve that. And if in the short term, acknowledging the possibility, maybe it is the gluten. I'm not going to fight you on it. So let's work together on this. Let's be open to all different possibilities, which means maybe I'm wrong. And so maybe it is gluten. Maybe there's a possibility it's not. If we're both open to, both of those routes, let's move forward with a plan that in the short term eliminates gluten, but puts us on a trajectory to actually get to the bottom of this. You know what I'm saying?
100%. I
All
think
right,
that's well
Helms.
articulated.
Little detour there, but I want to hit you with some rapid fire because you are going to be missing at least one episode in the future, maybe a couple. We've got some recorded interviews in the can. I want to make sure people are tapping in to the brain of the Dr. Eric Helms. So I'm going to hit you with some kind of shorter questions, a little more rapid fire kind of style here. So the first one that comes to mind is we had one here from Lewis. What are your thoughts on mini cuts, Eric Helms, as you're recently in a dieting phase? Have you used them? Do you plan to use them in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Mini cuts, I think, are kind of an integral a part of any approach that includes sufficient surpluses that result in fat accumulation for someone who is needing to be lean in the future or desiring to be lean. So, for example, I have used them multiple times. I use them as part of my pre-prep diet. So my peak off-season weight was 91.5 kilos. As we discussed, I'm 9 kilos lighter than that now in stage condition. This prep went really, really well because I started around 88, 89. So I only had to lose about 15 pounds to get into stage shape.
That's
What that
crazy,
means
man.
is,
That's not a lot of weight, especially for someone your size.
yeah, as I've gotten more and more experience with this sport, I've really figured out where is kind of my, yeah, I guess my lower intervention point. And it's a little bit leaner than I used to think, because I was started from like a skinny kid bulking background, which it's interesting. It gives you two different signals, right? So one, I should have remembered I was a naturally skinny kid. And
Yeah.
if I'd had some decent muscle on me, we probably would have realized I'm kind of walking around at like 12% body fat, you know? Um, and then that bulking experience that you and I both know very well from the articles and the nonsense that was occurring in the mid 2000s, every male, if they actually have testicles, must be over 200 pounds, regardless if you're 5'2". And by the way, oh, you're 6 foot, you're a bodybuilder, you should be on stage at 220 drug free. I learned that is not the case for me, nor for the vast majority of bodybuilders. There's probably been maybe one guy at that size, and now he's a Mr. Olympia. So anyway, um, that means that I have to start a diet at some point lighter than the peak of my off season. So I didn't just jump right into prep. So that pre-prep phase, I dieted from 91 and a half down to about 88, 87 and a half. and then ate at maintenance and restored a little bit of weight, a little bit of glycogen, a little bit of body fat, and got rid of any type of symptoms of REDS, metabolic adaptation, or any diet-related psychological fatigue before I started my prep properly in April, to be at the best combination of leanness, but also not being in a quote unquote dieted state, right? So mini cuts are also great for extended periods. Like for example, in my 2019 season, I hadn't competed since 2011. So my body weight got as high as 98 kilos. And that also was, an unnecessary amount of body fat for the goal of, being shredded, but potentially helpful for being in an extended surplus and just having more time, quote unquote, under the bar, but over my maintenance. So I did two different mini cuts to get down to 94, about like 8 months prior to competing, and then about 4 months prior to competing, down to about 90 for my diet in 2019. So it's a regular thing I use in people who are going to be trying to put on as much muscle mass as possible and accepting the not great return on investment of bulks generally. But I will say that for most people whose goal is to gain muscle, I think they're entirely optional, unless you are starting from a high body fat. But if you're in kind of a normative body fat range that you're reasonably comfortable with, I think body recomposition and just focusing on staying roughly in a body fat range that you're comfortable with, eating sufficiently to fuel training, focusing on progressive overload, and having a hard training stimulus, you will naturally see recomp happen. And I don't think that a big bulk is necessary. I think you can gain a little bit faster early on. But after that, I don't think bulks are really that beneficial after like the beginner phase, which therefore makes mini cuts sort of not needed either. So I think mini cuts are like a cleanup phase, mid bulk are necessary, but most of the time, I think people can get away with extended slight surpluses, and then if they find themselves in a position where they're a little unhappy with their body comp, they could do a mini cut, or they could do an extended slight deficit for what would be like a traditional 8 to 12 week diet. But I think it's an option on the table, and you don't want to know when to pull that lever.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been more partial toward slower phases. If I, for example, were to find myself, I've been bulking for a while and I'm like, I should probably lean out a little bit. My general tendency is to be a little more inclined to say, well, let's just like go in just the absolute slightest deficit possible and still hope that we can maybe continue adding some muscle along the way. But it's not something that I'm like religious about in nature. One of the things that drives me nuts about doing some of these kind of bigger fluctuations, some of these kind of shorter fluctuations with larger changes in calories is I just get annoyed watching all the turbulence in my weight. I think it's something about my brain's wired. I like to see these kind of smooth, long-term trends in body weight, and the kind of glycogen emptying, water weight shifts, stuff like that. It's all the noise in the data. I think maybe it's the statistician in me. It just drives me insane from like an
That's
aesthetic
fair.
level. But,
Actually,
but I do not dispute that mini cuts absolutely can fit in there and play an important role. Yeah.
you brought up a very important behavioral point, though. There are times when I favor one or the other. Some people who choose mini cuts are really just bad at maintenance.
Mm.
They bulk too hard, and
Yeah.
therefore they need big cuts to kind of get that back in order. And they act like they do this for optimal reasons. Like they would push back on you and say, "Well, no, 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 I don't want to spend all that time in a small deficit. You will get a better return on investment by just doing a big deficit for a short-term period. Your body fat's high. You won't lose any muscle. You get it done and dusted, and then you get right back into nice, big, useful surplus for the next 6 months, and you rinse and repeat." Sometimes the reality is they don't know how to run a 100 calorie surplus, and they don't know how to maintain. And I think that's actually an extremely useful skill that most people in modern society and many bodybuilders also don't have, is that behavioral component. And I do think you need to assess where someone's at psychologically. I personally have the lifestyle bodybuilding stuff down really, really well, but I don't like messing around with a small deficit. I like to just kind of, after I'm with the bulk, I don't want to eat, and I don't care about the large scale weight change. or any of those things. Like they don't bother me mentally, and I'd rather just go to almost like a fruit, vegetable, lean protein diet for 4 weeks, and my weight will drop like 3 kilos in a month, and I know 2 kilos of that is fat mass, and then I just get right back to it, and I'm back into a very small surplus.
Yeah.
I find that just more acceptable to my psychology. But in both of our cases, is we have the lifestyle down, so the options can be tailored to our preferences. We just need to make sure the preference isn't actually masking an underlying deficiency in someone's behavioral skill set that they need to develop.
Yeah. Well, here's the other side of the spectrum, Helms. What are your bulking tips for somebody with a very low appetite? Any low hanging fruit that you kind of tell people here's like the first, second, and third thing you ought to do?
Yeah, I think the first thing is go to a sufficient but not optimal or high fiber vegetable, fruit, and protein intake. That is the main thing. So a lot of the times you just need to kind of lead into hedonism and enjoyment. Like, what are your favorite foods? And then make sure you tick the box if I'm trying to get like a gram and a half of protein per kilogram of body mass. I'm trying to just hit that minimal USDA recommendation for fiber, like was I think 30 grams for men, 25 for women, or something
I
similar
think
to
it's
that.
38 for men, if I'm not mistaken. But
I think
yeah.
you might be right. Like 10 grams per 1,000 calories or
Right.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, hit that minimum and don't go over it. Get your 2 servings of fruit and vegetable every day, which will probably also get you to that point. Um, and focus on energy density, the
Yeah.
opposite way. So things that have more calorie per unit of weight of food. Um, and opt for fewer home cooked meals if you can afford it, because people are good at making things tasty and energy dense outside of the home. And that can really be a pretty good game changer. Also, make sure that you aren't pushing into body fats that are unnecessarily high because you have certain beliefs about bulking. Sometimes I run into people and they're like, "Yeah, I just can't push up to 220," and it's like their 10% body fat would actually be like 150, and it's like, dude,
Right.
you don't need to be there. Like
Yeah.
the reason why you're stuffed is because you are 50 pounds heavier than your body wants you to be, and you're on kind of the old school bulking mentality. So those are all of my main thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I had this, a student back in the day who's really strong. Like it signed up for my like weight training course that I was teaching as a grad student, like TA. And this kid ended up hitting the podium at USAPL Nationals. Like he was
Wow.
very strong. And I think it was the same kid who had come up to me and he was like, "Man, I just can't put on any weight." And I was like, "What are you eating?" And he was like, "Man, I eat more chicken breast and broccoli than you could ever possibly imagine." And I was like, "Brother, you're done for. You're never gonna make it." And he actually was like, he was quite lean and could stand to put on some weight for his powerlifting goals. And I was like, "Brother, like, have you heard of like breakfast cereal? What's your
Hmm.
stance on candy bars? Have you had ice
How do
cream
you feel
before?"
about Chipotle?
Yeah, like just like simple stuff where I was, and especially like, oh my God, can you imagine going back in time? Here's the one thing I have no regrets about Helms. The year that I was, my university, our food plans, the dining halls were mostly buffet style, right?
Hmm.
And thank God I had the foresight to choose that as a year that I wanted to gain a bunch of weight. Like I got to college, I was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna get huge. Like I just finished my wrestling career where I had to diet all the time. I'm gonna get massive. And oh my god, buffet food outside of the house, cooked. It was very good. Um, can you imagine though if you were on that kind of meal plan and you were eating chicken breast and broccoli every meal? What a waste. We had ice cream machines, Helms. So yeah, you just gotta sit down and be like, hey man, like remember the stuff that you used to eat before you cared about any of this stuff? Get some of that back in. It's nice, it's fun, and you're going to be able to actually hit your calorie goal without feeling like absolute trash all day. Because yeah, maybe you somehow with your chicken breast, broccoli, and white potatoes, or sweet potatoes, whatever you prefer, maybe somehow you hit your calorie goal, but you are going to feel disgusting if that calorie goal is anything over like 2,300, right? It's just too much fiber, too much bulk food material. You got to go with the energy density.
Well said.
Now, Helms, you alluded to what you called kind of bare minimum protein intake. Um, and I'm not going to hold you to that as like a literal, that is your official stance on it, because you were cooking, you were rolling with the answer. But it does remind me. So we had someone who asked, 21 years old, pretty lean, working out a lot, currently consuming 108 grams of protein a day at a body weight of 74 kilograms, which is, doing math real quick here, divided by 74.
It's about 1.5.
Yeah, 1.46 approximately. Just did that in my head. Don't worry about it. But anyway, so that's where he's at, and he's like, man, I feel like I should be bigger than I am. I feel like I'm leaving gains on the table, and ultimately the question is, how much protein should I be eating if I'm trying to bulk up here? And Helms, you obviously you have the new edition of the Pyramids books coming out soon.
Yeah. And we're doing the edits on the tables right now
Yeah,
with Anna.
nice.
She's
Yeah.
not only our copy editor for Mass, also for the Muscle and Strength Pyramids.
So the question is, now that you've kind of dug back into your books and I assume wrestled with all those basic questions of what is my new official stance on how much protein a person should eat, do you have like a little soundbite clip? I mean, the reason I ask is because the protein literature, every time a new study comes out, a new meta-regression, a new meta-analysis, there's some kind of debating over, should we bump the ranges up? Should we drop them down a little? Should we widen them? Should we make them more narrow? So we even published a meta-analysis not too long ago about protein. So if you were to give someone a little sound bite, straightforward, here is the Helms approach to protein targets, what would you tell this listener?
0.7 or higher if you want to feel really confident you're getting every benefit out of protein per pound, since we have a largely American audience, which is 1.6 ish
Yeah.
for gains. If you're in a deficit, 0.9 or higher, and that's based upon our meta regression, and it's also based upon like the Nunes
Yeah.
data where does it start to flatten out. But I also contextualize it in the book like this is where we stop getting a benefit, and I don't think it's that hard to hit zero point 0.7. You could make an argument that maybe it'd be even more safe to hit 0.8, 0.9 even in a surplus. Like where are we 100% certain there's no bendiness in that line? But we're talking about an effect size difference that is it's a difference, but it's there's no meaningfulness to it, arguably. At
Yeah.
least when we look at the trends in the larger, pool of data. When you do the chop and change in the Nunes analysis, and you look at higher than 1.6 to 1.2 to 1.59, it goes from trivial to small, and I would say it's a meaningful effect for people who care about it. If we think about the overall effect of lifting weights, so if someone was but again, we're chopping and changing. So that's why I don't typically say, 1.2 is just fine, even though it's a positive effect. I think that's a great place to go for the general pop, where the training is going to be such a primary factor and any gains are great. So like when Lauren, for example, on Front Page Fitness is speaking to, perimenopausal women lifting for the first time who have historically eaten 0.9, then absolutely 1.2 is a great target. But if we've got a guy coming to us saying, hey, I think it should be a little bigger, and he's already eating 1.4, 1.5, I would say, let's look at your training. Let's look at a lot of other things, your consistency. Let's look at your sleep. And if you get a chance to have an additional scoop away once per day, or like post-workout, you want to do a scoop and a half if you're currently having one scoop, do that as well. It takes zero effort and an extra $15 a month. And if you're comfortable with that, go for it. But I think having realistic expectation that it's not the thing that is preventing you from being the size you want by any means is important.
Yeah. Now, there's another protein question here, Helms. So one of our dear listeners, by the way, the last question was from T. This one is from Craig. Craig got a little nervous about that whole Consumer Reports article about lead and cadmium and protein. And so he took a picture of his supplements and said, ChatGPT, tell me what is safest to consume here. And it said, bulk supplements, EAAs, essential amino acids, is one of the cleanest ways to boost protein intake, no lead risk, no digestive issues, and safe to take several times daily. So the question is, can I use my essential amino acid supplement as my primary protein supplement? How should I take it throughout the day? Can I drink it alongside a mixed meal to boost protein?
Here's the thing about ChatGPT is it just reads things. It's a large language model. And here's the thing. Okay. The specific cutoff that consumer labs or reports, I forget which, is using for lead came from a law that was on the books, I think either from the 80s or 90s, which simply stated that if you're over a certain threshold that is not empirically based, it is consumer law that you must report that fact, not that it actually has a risk. And it is importantly a fraction of what has been empirically derived and what is recommended if you look at the European Safety Union or the USDA. And also, it is far lower than eating any vegetable. So when we cook things in the ground, and because the ground, the earth, has lead and other trace metals in it that if high enough doses can be toxic, if you eat spinach, it will probably have a higher lead content than almost every whey protein on the market that you buy, yet it is safe for consumption and healthy. So the lead contents reported in that consumer report and all the proteins that were above it is simply stating, hey, all of these proteins are above the thing where we are supposed to, from an informed consumer perspective, let them know. Not these lead contents are above the safe limit. And to my knowledge, almost no proteins are actually above that lead content. And if you want to be sure, you know what? Get a third-party tested one, which you should be doing anyway. But I would suggest that essential amino acids are far more expensive. And yeah, they might have a lower lead content, but it's all below a lead threshold that's an issue. And I would much prefer you just simply get, especially if you're willing to chill out for EAA, just get whey protein isolate from a third-party tested place. It'll be a higher quality protein. It'll be digested easier. It won't cost as much, and it'll arguably be better or just as good. So, yeah, the lead scare right now is not empirically based, and it is not based upon the actual metric which you care about, which is safety.
Yeah. No, I agree. We talked about that on Front Page Fitness. And folks, if you're not listening to Front Page Fitness, what in the world are you doing?
Seriously.
That's a show that I host with the Dr. Lauren Colenso Semple, another member of the Mass crew. We go live at 5:30 on Mondays, so check us out wherever you get podcasts. But Front Page Fitness, we talked about it. Yeah, they use these very indefensible lead cutoffs for the way they were framed in the article, in my opinion. None of the lead values were particularly scary. If you're a human being, you're eating lead and cadmium. Sorry to say it, folks. You're doing it. And so, yeah, the worst offenders, unsurprisingly, were the plant-based proteins because they're made out of plants, and plants come from the ground, and the ground has lead and cadmium. So,
There you go.
yeah. So I'm with you, Helms. And yeah, essential amino acids, they tend to be more expensive. I've heard that they don't taste very good.
Nope.
But I've never tried them because I'm not made out of money, Helms. What am I? The Monopoly guy, just wearing my tuxedo with the monocle and money coming out of my pockets everywhere. Come on. So yeah, I've never even had essential amino acids, but probably not the cost-effective way to go, and certainly I think an overreaction to what is ultimately not a particularly scary report when you drill down into the details.
As an aside,
Yeah.
I was reading. Actually, no, I was listening to someone discuss on some social media platform how Russia has been, with the assistance of bots and their own AI, producing a tremendous amount of pro-Russian content and just flooding the internet with it with these blog posts on various websites, specifically so that the consensus by a large language model becomes more pro-Russian.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how long until we have companies, or I mean, it's already happening with a nation, but this could be applied to any system where you have the monetary ability to flood the internet with information. A large language model will start to see that as consensus, even if it's artificially inflated, from other large language models creating the content, which is hilarious.
I'd
So
be
yeah,
stunned if it's not already happening.
and it is already happening. That's the
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
And it's just been kind of this big report came out upon on Russia doing it.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, and
yeah.
I think it happens even organically in something like this. Now everyone is, oh, people are focused on lead. I can make money off this content. Scaremongering works. Let's all talk about how lead is bad, and that's why, Craig, you're probably seeing ChatGPT buying into it.
Yeah.
And even though that is not actually an evidence-based position, and if you modify your prompt, this is a key thing about using AI. If you say something like, "Hey, ChatGPT, based upon empirical research in peer-reviewed journals that look specifically at human data on safety, based upon empirical, like if you give it this caveat, what proteins are above the lead count that I would want?" It would say, "Well, not all proteins have lead. Here are the ones, or actually track that. You'd want to actually get one that has batch testing among those that I can access. There are none that are over it." It's probably something like that you would get. And here's how would you find more about that.
But it would start by saying, "That's such a smart question. You're so smart. I love
It
the way
does
you ask
always boost you up.
questions.
Yeah, I love
You
it.
ask the
Yeah.
best questions. If I had it my way, I wouldn't answer anyone's questions except for yours because you ask the best ones,
I
Dr.
love how it
Helms.
boosts you. It always boosts you up. You
Oh, for
gotta love it.
sure. But yeah, it's that's the thing that I think it's especially like Helms. I'm back in the classroom. I'm teaching.
You're dealing with undergrads, yeah.
Um, and I was warned them with AI. First of all, it will take over everything and kill all of us. So that's one thing that I warned them
That
about. The
little
other thing
downside.
is, yeah, I mean, it's actually really funny. There was I start to see because I'm teaching exercise physiology, so I'm seeing made up citations that are like a synthesis of all the things that author would have written, but they did not write
Yes.
that thing. So it's like just kind of mixing and matching. You know, titles are very formulaic in exercise science
Hmm.
journals, right? So it's like this intervention with that population over this time scale. And I'm like, I know that guy, and he did not do that study, but it is something he would have done. So you got to be careful with this stuff because it's ultimately probability based, and like you said, Helms, that can be, it can lead to some of these hallucinations I'm mentioning. It can lead to
Manipulation.
essentially democratizing what is correct in the sense of, hey, let's take a
Yes.
poll and see what the most probable answer is without really knowing what is true. So you got to be really careful with that stuff. All right, Helms. A couple of additional questions here that I think are going to be on a lot of people's minds. So, the first one I have here is substrate utilization during cardio at different intensities. It's the age-old question, right? Should I
Mm.
focus on burning fat? Should I focus on just burning a bunch of calories and letting the substrates settle the way they're going to settle? The way I want to start this question, though, is Helms, what has been your cardio approach for this prep, if any? Have you been doing any structured cardio?
No. I make sure that I get into the step count range that is normative for me, and I typically do that with my activities of daily living. We walk to breakfast, and then I get in some other 15 to 20-minute walk. And I know with working out every day and just loading plates and walking around, that gets me into the range that's appropriate. And then in the off season, I just am not as intentional with finding a way to get that second walk. The times I have had to do cardio are when it's raining in Auckland and we can't walk to breakfast, we need to drive. So what I do, and this is sometimes awful, especially when you're deep into prep, is I will go down because I have a rower, and I will do 15 minutes of hit because I get up a little bit earlier than my wife. So I basically go as hard as I can for 15 to seconds to 60 seconds, recover at a light pace until I can do it again, and I do that until I just can't physically do it anymore for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then I sit in the passenger seat while my wife drives and recover until we get to breakfast.
Yeah.
So that is purely based upon the fact that that is the fastest way that I can burn an equivalent amount of calories that I need to for the walks that day in that time period. It is not because HIT is better, the rower is magic, fat loss, substrate utilization. It is certainly just the inverse relationship that exists in cardio between intensity and volume. That's all it is.
I gotta admit, I'm jealous. I've tried to get on the rower. I can't get the hang of it. like I just can't get that cadence down with the coordination to feel like I'm actually doing anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you just have to do a leg press as hard as you freaking can, and then do like the way that IPP pro bodybuilders do a back extend, do like a cable row, but not actually, and then do the cable row at the last second.
Yeah.
So I do think of it as a two-part leg press, lean back, yank, and then I come back in.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that it doesn't feel super natural to me, and that I do it super rarely, probably once every 3 months, because I know that I'm burning a ton of inefficient calories.
Yeah, it's like when I jump in a pool and I'm like I'm either gonna drown or burn like 7,000 calories.
And drowning burns a lot of calories.
Yes,
So
it
you
does.
just need to make sure you don't actually drown at the end of it. And
Yeah,
that you want to call that swimming cardio, then money.
absolutely. All right, so I'm with you. Ample evidence to suggest, like, listen, we don't need to be thinking about, am I burning mostly carbohydrate here, mostly fat here? What's the exact proportion? At the end of the day, just burn your calories. Whatever carbohydrate you're burning in the short term, you're going to make up for that on the back end by burning fat to kind of meet your, you're going to be in an oxygen debt there. You're going to repay it, and you're going to be burning fat to make that happen. So that whole epoch excess post exercise oxygen consumption, you're gonna be churning through the fat. You're just taking out a little carbohydrate dependent loan in the short term. So don't
Well
worry
said.
too much about that. The only time I would worry about it, or be mindful of it, be particularly mindful of it, would be you got to balance recovery, right? So
Yes.
there was a phase that we all went through in the evidence based fitness world. Many of us, I don't know, I wouldn't say all, but around 2013-ish, man, 2012, 2013, people were just doing like modified repeated wind gates and just,
2009 as well, man. It goes back further.
yeah, doing really, really nauseating, literally high intensity cardio intervals and just spamming them day after day after day after day.
That was
Too
my '09
many.
prep.
Yeah. And
Had a hamstring tear that year.
yeah, and people are just beating their body up and feeling like crap. I mean, those drain you in a way that is almost emotional. It's spiritual when you're doing a bunch of those. And so, yeah, I remember at one point I was doing a prep where I was doing all that stuff. And man, I made a diet change. And I think I was like 8 weeks out, something like that. And I knew with the diet change, I should be expecting a certain rate of weight loss. And I was getting nothing. And it was still
Yep.
nothing, 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 nothing. And I was like, what is happening? Because, like, I knew that like I didn't change foods. I literally used to eat this much and now I eat less of it. So it's not like I'm eating some food that I'm tracking wrong or something like that, or the label is wrong. Like it was the same food, smaller portions, and weight loss wasn't happening. So I actually just took like 4 days completely off. No lifting, no cardio, just chilled. And I had a drop in water weight like you wouldn't believe. And it was just like I was just beating my body up. I mean,
100%.
so
That is
much,
absolutely a
yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
I
so
see it
much
time and
water
time again as a
retention.
coach. Yeah, so just to echo what you're saying, yeah, there are two specific times where I think you need to think about this. It's like, A, if you're actually leveraging cardio for a performance adaptation, then it needs to be specific to your goal.
Right.
And then the physique, caveat or exactly what you said, which is if you're doing a crap ton of it, you shouldn't be. You don't want to primarily leverage cardio. And just like there's an inverse relationship between intensity and volume, that's true volume across the sessions, across the week. And if you are going to be doing, there's a reason why when I do those sporadic hit sessions that I chose to get a rower. If I didn't, I would have chose to get a bike or I would have chose to get an elliptical. They don't have impact. They don't have any centric component, and you can beat yourself up pretty bad. Like those mornings, I'm glad I'm training in the afternoon to do legs, um, because I need some time to kind of resynthesize some glycogen, what limited amounts I have before I can go train. But yeah, it should be an adjunct tool, not your primary tool for one, and even more so if it's high intensity. And the last little caveat is there may be some very, very distinct periods where you do care about substrate utilization, and I would refer you to our episode where we discussed the ECA stack and Yohimbine,
Yeah.
where you may be trying to get from stupid lean to crazy lean and trying to enhance local stubborn fat, uh, uh, like lipolysis and actual burning of that fat for fuel because it's difficult to tap into otherwise, and it might help you save muscle. But that is a check out that episode, ECA stack. If you Google that along with iron culture, it'll come up, and it applies to almost no one who listens to the show except for people who are 6 weeks out.
Did you use any of that stuff this time around?
Well, what I basically did was I just timed my Yohimbine. I did, of course, the YCA stack because of Veterans Band to do it prior to my morning walks. And I did that for a brief period before Taiwan. And then I stopped once we kind of got into the condition we were looking for. And I haven't done it since. So I haven't even been using it for this,
Yeah.
the 2 weeks after Taiwan.
Nice. All right. Another question here. Brief one. So we'll probably wrap up with this one. So
Cool.
someone said, my wife and I just had our first kid last Monday. Congrats.
Yeah, huge congrats.
Who's asking this? Sneed. So congrats to Sneed and Company. And he apologized for missing the show. So I appreciate that.
Priorities.
Yeah. The question is, what do I do to mitigate the loss of sleep and its impact on my training or my gains? Should I reduce volume and focus on maintenance until our sleep patterns have reestablished? Would you go straight to some training modifications? Would you go straight to some more direct interventions to try to improve sleep? Or would you do like a little mix and match combination?
That's a great question. And this is, I will just say that, neither Trex nor I have kids. So this is our coaching experience, probably talking for the most part, would you say?
Well, I have two cats. Actually, my cat woke me up several times the other night. It happened to me one night, and I was like, this is unbearable.
Trex, parents of humans hate nothing more than people with pets acting like they're the same. So I'm
My
glad you
cat
took
woke me
that
up.
bullet. I'm glad you took that bullet. But I
Yeah.
will say, cats are notorious sleep disruptors. So actually, I feel like I understand what it's like to be a new parent. Because cats are
Yeah.
nocturnal. They will
I'm
wake you up
being
multiple times per
facetious. No,
night.
my cats,
Yeah.
they actually are really great. Well, one of them, Izzy, the older cat, she just likes to sleep. She's just chill. But the little one, Chai, she's very needy and sensitive. Like she's the sweetest little cat, but she will not eat alone. She needs me to
You're
be
telling me,
there
yeah.
to protect her. And so she will wake me up every morning at about 4 or 5 in the morning and say, I need to go get a snack.
Yep.
Coincidentally, that's when I wake up. So I'm like, this is awesome. I just have like a little buddy alarm clock. And now instead of hitting the snooze button, I actually feel like I love this little cat. She's stressed out. Now I actually feel compelled to get out of bed and do her a little favor. So it's
That
not all
works
bad.
out. Yeah. So all that is to say, Trex took the heat, but I am actually going to secretly co-sign that most people with cats understand sleep disruption, or they make it work for their schedule. And from my experience as a coach, um, some people get lucky and they have a short-term time period where this is a problem they have to solve for 3 months. Other people, it's a couple years, 2 to 3 years, and they kids just wake up in the middle of the night and they need to do something about it. So I think the first thing is because this is really, really early days, it's good that you're being proactive, but also just be mindful that you may or may not have quite as much of an issue with this as you think. And then it's a matter of being willing to think outside the box and just getting the best of a bad case scenario. Naps are quite good, and sleeping in shifts, actively discussing like kind of a partnership plan with your partner of who's going to wake up when, which days, how, when are you going to take a break and I get sleep, who's taking off time from work, all those things interact. And then as far as your training schedule, that is what I would focus on. Um, and the first thing I would say is, like I said, it might be better than you think, but I would plan proactively, like you are, good job, to figure out what is an MED approach for this. Like
Minimum
if life
effective
is
dose.
correct, yeah, like what's the least amount I can do to not regress for my fitness goals right now? And that's going to be goal specific, but let's say we're talking hypertrophy. That can be 4 sets per muscle group per week that are relatively high intensity, close to failure. Whatever rep range you feel comfortable. If you're feeling weak and you have to train at weird times per day, maybe you're operating in that, like 10 to 20 rep range. If you have concurrent strength goals, maybe you need to do specific movements and lift heavy. but some moderate RPE singles on the lifts you care about. We're talking a single at a 5 to 7 RPE once per week will absolutely hold the line or slow a decay, even in a high level lifter. Because I've used this for multiple injured power lifters and even power lifters who just need to put on more size, and we put the lifts on a back burner. And you'd be surprised how much they can maintain with. So, honestly, we're talking 2 to 3 heavy singles per week per lift. That's takes minimal time, and heavy can be objective as like say 85% of your current 1RM, but a single at 85% is like a 5 RPE. And then for hypertrophy, it can be as low as 4 hard sets per muscle group per week. And then figure out when would I place that? How would I schedule that with my sleep? And then think about what that plan might look like in advance. So you know, like your worst case tick the box scenario that might last as little as 2 weeks, 3 months, or might be a few years. And then think of anything after that as extra credit in these early parenting years. That's what I would approach the problem with.
Yeah, and like you said, you never know what you're gonna get, man. My brother, he had his first kid, and they were bracing for, oh boy, here we go. Let's figure out how bad sleep is gonna be. That baby slept like 12 hours straight every single night. Like that
Wow.
baby did not. It almost. Well, frankly, it concerned them at first. They're like,
Yeah,
is
that's
this
worrying.
okay?" But they talked to their pediatrician or whatever, and he was like, "No, it's fine. Yeah, you're good." And so yeah, this is a completely healthy kid. He's yeah, I don't want to give too much personal information. He's a toddler now. So yeah, it was fine. The dude just slept well, like nonstop throughout the night. Then they had their second one, and it could not have been more different.
Oh man.
So it's you never know what you're gonna get. And of course, I was being facetious about my little cats, but it was coincidental because poor little Izzy does that like reverse sneezing thing. She has some kind of
Hmm.
respiratory thing going on right now. It's very loud. So she was sleeping on my chest because it's colder out now, and so she was like just having like a little sneezing fit on my chest at 2 in the morning. So that was fresh in my memory. But certainly it's not nearly the same experience as a newborn human. All right, Helms. Great advice, very practical. I noticed that you didn't say develop a debilitating addiction to caffeine, which is interesting because that's usually what I do when my sleep gets poor. So,
Interesting that you don't coach it that way, but that's your personal approach, right?
correct. Yes, that is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
All right, so Helms, one last thing I want to address here before we sign off for the night. So I've talked about this before, this phenomenon. We need to come up with a name for it, but it is very clear when content has been made.
Ah, step
Like
counts.
every now and then I'll look through the spreadsheet here, and I'm not poking fun or criticizing, but it's just it's so easy to see. Like every now and then it'll be like a random Tuesday, and we'll get like 11 straight questions about testosterone replacement therapy, and the question is, who released a YouTube video about TRT today? It's like
Yep.
every question is on basically the same theme, and that happened again, Helms, and it happened today, and maybe a little bit last week, but basically we got like a zillion questions of people saying essentially something in this genre. I walk 25, even 30,000 steps a day. I consume 1,600 calories per day. I am too large to be doing that much activity and consuming that few calories. What is happening?
Mm.
And it is juxtaposed with a couple questions that are also like, I heard a new paper came out that said exercise energy compensation and the constrained energy model are completely debunked in BS and phony, and there's nothing to them. And this is the life, Helms, of studying something that is plausible, has evidence, and yet is unproven, is still
Hmm.
debated, where you're going to get in your inbox, clearly this doesn't exist. And also, here's 11 pieces of evidence of this existing. Please make sense of it. But do not refer to the model that allegedly got debunked that fully describes exactly what's happening. So I'm not complaining. I think it's really funny. Like I feel very fortunate, and it's a very exciting thing to be engaged in an area of research that you believe, whether or not it's true doesn't matter, but you believe is impactful, matters, has huge potential, and is current. There is still
Hmm.
debate over what's happening here, and that's a really exciting thing. Like Helms, you and I both know a lot of people who their research line eventually leads them to a land where they are just beating a dead horse for the last
Yep.
25 years of their career. Ugh, who wants to do that work, right? So it's fun, and it's you have to recognize as a researcher you're very fortunate to be in an active, unsettled area of science, and that's where I find myself. But folks, all I can say is this: I am going to write up a whole mass article about that paper that that basically, I wouldn't say it claims to debunk the constrained
Yep.
energy expenditure model, but it definitely says our data are fully incompatible with the model. I don't believe that to be the case for multiple reasons, which I'll get into in a lot of depth later. But the short version is all these comments that people are making essentially reflect what I've gone into a lot of detail. Helms, there's that one episode in the title. It has something to do with metabolic adaptation and exercise energy compensation. I can go try to find the exact episode that we did, but it was just a deep dive into both of these theories, how they fit together, and what seems to me to be fairly hard to refute. Now, listen, I'm never gonna be the person who says, "Look at all these anecdotes. How could we be wrong?" Right? I'm not. We saw a lot of that with like reverse dieting and stuff. I don't want to go down that road because that's not a strong foundation. But people have done the actual work to kind of light went off. People have done the work to kind of get to the bottom of what happens to energy expenditure when we limit intake significantly. What seems to happen to energy expenditure when we are on a low fixed caloric diet and we're doing very high levels of activity? What happens when we're doing high levels of physical activity without a dietary constraint? Like, this work has been done, and it broadly in the aggregate points us to a few conclusions. Number one, if you create a significant energy deficit via dietary energy restriction, there's a decent probability that your body is going to have some adaptive reduction in energy expenditure. And number two, if you do that plus a ton of walking, there still seems to be a pretty significant reduction in energy expenditure that occurs. And then number three, even if you're not intentionally dieting, if you happen to be on a fixed set of calories that is relatively low, and you start pushing your activity level very, very high, energy expenditure just doesn't seem to climb as high as you would expect. And there's evidence for this across so many different populations, whether we're talking pastoralists, hunter gatherers, sedentary Americans, ultra endurance athletes, people with anorexia, people with severe obesity. We've seen it across so many different places. Now, I will say this, though. We haven't yet been able to really tie the whole thing together, and that's on us. Not because of lack of effort or moral shortcomings. The reality is, Helms, think of all the things we try to, it's very easy in many cases to do some of these like training studies, right? We know what the intervention is. We know what we're measuring. How thick is your muscle? We'll bring you in a couple times, try to control what we need to control. But what about if the outcome is heavily influenced by fidgeting? Like,
Yep.
what if it's heavily influenced not just by fidgeting, but also by your volitional choices to be more active or less active throughout the day? And we're talking about in your day-to-day life, just do you happen to sit more in scenarios where you used to stand more? Do you happen to decide to walk up one flight of stairs instead of the elevator? Like these little tiny micro decisions plus postural adjustments plus fidgeting. Helms, it's really, really hard to measure these things that may very well be major factors that are kind of what ultimately happens with this research is we have a like a whodunit. It's like a murder mystery.
Mm-hmm.
We see the result. There's a carcass on the floor, Helms, but who did it? And so
Yeah.
we're trying to
What is
figure.
being adapted to get you there, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
well, and we have a good idea of what is being adapted to, but where is the adaptation occurring? which is
That's
what you're
that's
referring
what I
to,
meant.
right? Which is,
Yes, yes.
we know the levers that are inducing this, and it seems to be a convergence of factors related to both energy intake and expenditure. And you can, they're faders, right? You can scale up one, scale down the other, and vice versa. You can go all in on one, all in on the other. But clearly, this energy shortfall is inducing some adaptations, but it's very, very hard to sort out where are they. And until we can paint that whole picture, there's going to be a lot of skepticism. And I don't blame anyone for that. I don't fault them for it. But at the end of the day, fitness is an outcomes-oriented business, Helms. And so
Yeah.
when we get this wave of 7 people asking, how do you explain why I'm on super low calories and walking a lot at my body size? I would say I've explained that pretty consistently for with some minor alterations as the
Yeah.
evidence changes, but my take on that is pretty much consistent with that previous episode, which I'll link in the show notes once I find it.
And actually, we talked about it last week.
Yeah, we talked about it last week,
Yeah.
but there's
Yeah.
that one
You
full
responded to
episode
the.
where
That's true. But yeah, I think the reason we're getting the rash of questions right now is the specific study that got published that supposedly debunked it, which I think we did a great job. You did a great job discussing last week. And the other reason, because I was just like, I bet while you're talking, I could find the study that was on the other type of step count questions we're getting related to health.
yeah.
And on Monday, there was actually a paper. I haven't found the paper yet, but I've found people writing about it. So on Monday, there was a study published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And I think here's a really important thing to remember about it. It was on 33,560 people, average age of 62, engaging in 8,000 steps per day or less. Huge caveat. And they were specifically looking at other factors that could influence all-cause mortality. And they found that within this cohort, all-cause mortality decreased with bout length independent, or at least somewhat independent, of doing steps. So those walking in bursts of less than 5 minutes were at greater risk of death than those who walked for 15 minutes or more. So there is some interaction when you're at a step count that is relatively low,
Right.
8,000 daily steps or fewer, with bout length. And probably the reason why they chopped and changed it like that is because how do you get more than 8,000 daily steps if you never walk longer than 5 minutes? You'd have to literally get up, 5 minutes, walk, stop, do it again, you know?
Yeah.
So there is physics restrictions on this. And I think that signal would be much weaker in the noise if this was a study that was looking at people that did not have a restriction on total daily steps per day. And just because it's worse for walking less than 5 minutes than 15 doesn't mean that that's not better or still a positive outcome depending upon where you're starting. And I think those are things that are being lost in the mix and why we're getting these questions.
Yeah. Now, Helms, you did mention this prep. You didn't do any structured cardio, but you aimed for kind of a consistent step count for you. What is that, if I may ask?
I average between 9 to 13,000 steps per day, with an average probably right around 11 during
Yeah.
prep. And then in the off season, it's probably closer to 9. So I
Yeah.
did like a 20% increase during prep and kept it there, which is good. I noticed that when I keep a consistent step count, nutrition changes have much more reliable effects.
Yeah. Yeah, unsurprising. Yeah. I was thrilled. I'm so used to being just assuming that I'm very sedentary because I work from home for so long. Now that I'm back on campus and I got my lab, which is across campus from where I teach and where my office is and stuff, I just checked my phone on a whim the other day and I actually averaged 10,000 steps a day. And I'm like, look at
That's
that.
amazing.
Yeah,
That's
look at
great.
me living forever. Me and what's his name? Brian Johnson?
That's right.
Not the Liver King,
For
the other
different
one.
reasons for him. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I know you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, he and I are both fighting to be the first to live to 200. So we'll see who gets there first.
That's good because you thought you were going to make it to maybe 41 last time we talked.
Well, yeah, but then I checked my phone. I'm like
And here we
10,000
go.
steps a
You're like,
day.
actually, 5 times that. Yeah.
Yeah, easy.
Oh, man.
Well, cool. All right, Helms. I tell you what, man. I think it's probably about time to wrap it up for the night. We hit a bunch of the highlights here. Anything you want to tell the good people before we head out?
I just want to thank them. I've been getting an outpouring of support for my shows. I did my recap on the 3DMJ YouTube, and I went into even more detail about kind of how I felt about that competition, and people are encouraging me and thinking that I can do really well at this next show, and they're just saying, "Hey, try not to stand up really quickly or take an inadvisable amount of laxatives." And those are things I've taken to heart. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I wish you would have run the laxative thing by me. I feel like I would have given you the steady advice when you're at a fork in the road, Helms. This is one of my, like, when I write a book with my like wisdom for life. When you're at a fork in a road, choose the route with no laxatives. That's like that advice is never going to let you down.
You know, you're not wrong, and I'll reach out next time I'm having a laxative-based fork in the road conundrum,
Yeah.
and I'll have you weigh in, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll read you some excerpt about the virtue of patience. So,
I
well,
like
well,
it.
let's not take shortcuts here, right? All right, Helms. Well, this is the last we'll be speaking on the airwaves before the big show. So,
Next time it'll
huge.
be live. I think I'll be able to make the show, and I will let people know how it went. And if I won't be able to be there, then disregard this because it'll be one of two interviews where we have either me or Trex with someone else.
Yes. Someone will be here a week from today on Monday at 7 p.m. or sooner. But Helms, good luck in the show. Hope you have a great time. Hope that your peak week is smooth and less eventful than last time. And more than anything, I hope you have fun.
Thank you, brother.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you. Take care and have a fantastic week.